Hi, I'm Iain Moran from Crowdguard. Thanks for joining the presentation on balancing budget and risk when protecting publicly accessible locations. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about who Crowdguard are and what we do when it comes to temporary event security, semi-permanent security and permanent security in the forms of hostile vehicle mitigation. So, who are Crowdguard? We are specialists in event security and HVM. We provide a unique plan, provide and protect service. It's a holistic approach, and this includes risk assessing, specification and deployment. And what makes that unique is our ability and our in-house services to help you understand what risk and threats you're looking to mitigate against. We then in-house can provide solutions to mitigate against that assessed risk and threat, and deploy the solutions and take the solutions away to provide you with the level of protection that is proportionate and cost effective to your needs. So with the upcoming Martin's Law, you will have obligations to provide some form of assessment or some form of proportionate security measures. Although not law yet, Martin's Law will affect publicly accessible locations with a capacity of 100 people or more. Currently, what we do know that this will fall into a standard duty or a enhanced duty. With the standard duty, there's going to be a mandated requirement for venues with 100 to 799 attendees that you ensure that relevant workers receive appropriate counter-terrorism training, and that you also undertake a terrorism evaluation to understand how best to respond in the event of such an attack. When we move over to the enhanced duty, which is venues with 800 plus capacities, again, mandated under Martin's Law, you will have an obligation to appoint a designated senior officer to the premises or to the event. You will also need to complete and review your terrorism risk assessments, specifically around terrorism. As a side to that as well, you'll need to consider the types of terrorist acts that are most likely to occur on your premises or at your event space or on the approaches to your event space, and implement reasonably practical and proportionate security measures. And that's really, really key, that proportionality is taken into account. Yes, but we need to also keep and maintain a security plan throughout. So understanding the risk is vitally important and forms part of that plan triangle of our plan, provide, protect. So threat and risk, they're not the same thing. The threat is the desire and want of somebody wanting to cause harm to said event or publicly accessible location. The risk is them having the nous and the ability to be able to carry out that particular threat. So we look at sites and work with various stakeholders, of which there are multiple, to understand what the threat, vulnerability and risk is. And we carry out the TVRA. That because we focus on hostile vehicle mitigation, because a hostile vehicle is a very prevalent form of attack at the moment, because it's a low educated, simple attack where many people can get their hands on vehicles very easily. They're accessible here in the UK, as opposed to a vehicle-borne improvised explosive device or a gun-style attack, because they're very difficult things to do here in the UK. TVRAs then tend to lead to vehicle dynamic assessments, and that VDA allows us to determine the largest worst case scenario style vehicle and the velocity and speed that vehicle would travel at if it was to cause harm to drive into a crowded space. Understanding that allows us to look at various different things. It allows us to look at what equipment would prevent and halt and stop that vehicle, or if a different set of equipment is more viable, which opens you to some residual risk that you then understand after carrying out the TVRA and the VDA. That allows you to make informed decisions, and informed decisions lead to proportionality and the correct equipment going into place, and therefore something that meets your operational requirements as well as your security threat, and ties in and meets with your available budget to mitigate against these threats and risks. So we're never just looking at this from a security bird's eye view perspective. We always need to take into account the operational requirements of the event or the crowded place and the available budget. Proportionality. This is a key word and a key part of our offering and our service. Hostile vehicle mitigation is counter-terrorism protection. It's not traffic management. It's not traffic calming. It's specialised in what it is. It is product that is certified and tested, and it needs to be deployed and installed in the correct manner and certified to PAS 69 or IWA 14.1, for example. It can absolutely work in conjunction with ATROs or temporary traffic regulation orders that are put in place for events, and it can work, if it's correct, to be in the similar positions to where soft traffic calming measures may be in situ, but it's a specialist deployment. It should always be aligned to the risk, the operational requirements and budget. And at that point, it's very important to consider any form of residual risk, because if we're putting measures in to protect an event and the measures are not certified to the full risk, there is a residual risk and a gap that absolutely needs outlining to all stakeholders, so everybody needs to understand that. That also comes in line with operational requirements and budget. If events or stakeholders can't afford to put in, the measures that would mitigate all the risk, they can make informed risk-based decisions to put different measures in because it meets a budget constraint and requirement better, or it meets an operational requirement better. Again, coming back to looking at all those three things in one to get the best possible solution. This helps us to avoid over-specification. It helps reduce the cost, and we've got many live examples of deploying equipment following the threat, vulnerability and risk assessment where costs have actually reduced for stakeholders who are putting events on. Martin's Law talks about a collaborative approach. There is a lot of different stakeholders involved in events putting on, from us as a HVM provider and assessor, event organisers, police, counter-terror security advisors, landowners, security teams, traffic management companies. It's holistic, and all stakeholders' considerations need taking into account to provide a proportionate solution. Key specification questions that need to be asked and need to be understood is, where do I really need to position my hostile vehicle mitigation rather than traffic management, or where will traffic management suffice? What options are available in the marketplace? Understand how your choices of different products affect the level of risk or residual risk that you may have to accept, or you may want and be willing to accept. And understand if HVM can provide operational benefits and cost savings. With a number of our products, we do a lot of branding on the products when they go out to events, and external customers pay for advertising space on some of these products. And we need to look collectively on how your HVM can revenue generate for your event, as well as keep people safe and in a very friendly and welcoming environment. Temporary hostile vehicle mitigation tends to be the go-to for short-term events in event spaces that, don't have regular mass crowds of people. It's based on cost per deployment, only gets deployed on an as-needed basis when there is a specific threat there, when there is large groups of people. Various aesthetic options and versatile for changing needs, so for quick vehicular access for blue light routes, for aesthetic options to allow branding or advertising, pedestrian permeable options. All of our options are fully surface mounted, so no infrastructure gets harmed when the equipment's taken away, and deployment can be extremely fast, and de-rig and taking the equipment away can also be extremely fast. Semi-permanent HVM really has its place, and we're starting to see a lot of this in the marketplace. We work on a lot of events that are repeated in the same locations year on year, or quarter on quarter, or biannually. This can become a one-off cost that over a period of time is a more cost-effective way to go. Product and small infrastructure and shallow foundation is installed in fixed locations, and then the above ground hostile vehicle mitigation element is flexible to move into position on an as needed basis. So it's almost like the temporary hostile vehicle mitigation. It's not in situ, but there is some infrastructure in the ground, and as it's needed, that infrastructure is populated. It's rapidly deployed once that infrastructure is in situ, and roads can be closed off in a few minutes. various aesthetic options, whether that just be traditional bollard upstand cores maximising pedestrian permeability, or seating and benching, planting, cycle parking, pedestrianisation. Various different aesthetics can be incorporated in, leading them from temporary to semi-permanent to more permanent hostile vehicle mitigation schemes, and very viable in the PAL's urban realm remit of, city centre environments. There's a one-off cost, fixed locations to create safe locations within a PAL's area. There is always foundations required with this type of equipment, and taking into account operational requirements of vehicles moving around to authorised locations in city centres and pedestrians moving around. It's something that it takes much more from a planning stage perspective and has a much longer gestation period to close off a particular area. These systems are constantly deployed, they're permanent in their nature. So whether that be seating, whether that be static bollards, bus shelters, planting, they would be installed and they would be a permanent fixture, with a number of areas that can allow automation for vehicles to easily access and egress into authorised positions, and it can work and blend in with any city centre environment from a control perspective. Various aesthetic options again can be catered for, and they can blend in with any kind of city centre culture. So, budget versus risk. The way to install measures and hostile vehicle mitigation schemes and counter-terror measures is to work with the experts. Understand what your threat, vulnerability and risk is. It's absolutely key to know this, because then you can actually start to understand what your requirement is and what type of budget you will need to be able to put any form of measures in place. Now, then measures can leave you with some residual risk, which is absolutely okay to accept once you understand the risk that you're accepting. Always, it's extremely important to factor in your operational needs. Schemes that go ahead that don't take into account the OR of an event fail. It naturally fails because the measures end up having to be left open so that the event can run and operate. It's vitally important that the right stakeholders are in the room early to discuss what the operational requirements are. Consider that commercial viability. Everything should be tried to done as cost effective as possible to provide the correct level of security without hindering the event, and the event from an operational perspective, and the event for all the stakeholders and customers that are attending to have that experience of the event. We absolutely don't want to be hindering that. Look at holistic long-term strategies. So looking at this in the round to understand that threat, vulnerability and risk, how that may change going forward. If your event is a different event but in the same place, the demographic of the crowd that are attending could be different, their behaviour could be different. So understand what that longer term strategy is as well, so we can do things once and do it right instead of having it to change and change and change. Select options that are proportionate and affordable. By understanding what your threat and risk is, that absolutely allows you to do that and to keep your costs to an actual minimum. And even though Martin's Law is not law as yet, everyone has a duty of care to kind of prepare for what that is, and a responsibility of people attending these events. And that doesn't mean spending lots of money on putting hostile vehicle mitigation measures in. It means planning and being proportionate and understanding what your risk and threat is, and then determining the best value way of doing something about that. If you'd like to get in touch with myself, my contact details are on the screen, along with our counter-terror director, Russ Phillips, and Deborah Ainscoe, our founder and director of Crowdguard. So I'd like to just say thank you very much for your time. And if you've got any questions, let me know.